It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the owner of the Fantasy Coach Sports Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Thanks for having me on, guys. My name is Steve Pintado, so I'm real glad to be here today.
You're welcome, Stephen. Can you talk about how you got started in the Sports Talk podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So we mostly do, like I said, fantasy football, but I've been playing fantasy football for years and years, and I've continuously done research and really just wanted to win all the time. It was just a competitive thing I had that I continuously just love to do each and every year. And one day, me and my buddy were talking about it, and I was like, let's do a podcast. Like, let's share what we do and help others win championships, or at least compete for championships, like me and my friend do. So we decided about a year and a half ago that we wanted to start doing it, and we came up with the Fantasy Coaches podcast and been going ever since.
That's amazing. What kind of segments do you have on the Fantasy Coaches podcast?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of different things going on. Mostly we stick to a lot of redraft leagues, just like in-season long leagues. We also have segments of doing a dynasty, more of a year-round kind of thing. And then we also very involved in daily fantasy as well. We have kind of broken off into 3 different sections that we all either podcast, or we do live streams, or we do write articles about. All kinds of things kind of going around that we do all year long. We have a really great team who kind of sections it off, who does different things for different parts of those leagues.
Can you talk about the rookie draft that you have as a segment?
Yeah, so obviously every April, May, and the NFL draft goes down, and like rookies that are coming out of college, they are drafted to football teams and whatnot. So that's the type of year where we're talking about rookies and kind of going in depth about what they've done on the field in the college level, and once they get drafted, how they fit in their team. So we do a lot of rookie drafts right after the NFL drafts. Basically, this is more of a dynasty thing where in dynasty, you do one draft and we won one big draft, and after that, every year you just do a rookie draft. And this rookie draft contains like 4 or 5 rounds mostly. And we did a lot of getting people ready for that and knowing what rookies to take and which rounds they should go at benefits their fantasy teams.
How do you prepare for example, the rookie draft?
It's a lot of research. It's knowing what these players did in college and what they were good at, and then following that, where they land. There could be college players who are fantastically talented, but they land in bad situations depending on what team they go to. So you have to really look at the whole picture of like what they're capable of doing and how they fit into the scheme of the offense that they're going into. So sometimes it may not be good, like a guy like DeAndre Swift, who's on the Detroit Lions. Really talented guy, but currently right now not in the best situation. And then you get a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was pretty talented in college, but didn't expect him to be a top running back in that draft, which he ended up being the top rookie in that draft, and goes to a great situation like the Kansas City Chiefs. So it really just depends on what their talents are and how they really fit into the scheme of that offense.
When after you draft the rookies, like how do you proceed with it? Like, do you pick up or drop the rookie?
Well, usually a lot of rookies, more and more lately in the last decade now, that rookies end up playing a lot more in the rookie year. They get much more involved and they're talented, they're faster, they're more talented most of the time. So in terms of like a dynasty league, that's something where, you have to see which the situation is and where they fit. And there's some rookies who, are great, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's someone that you have in your starting lineup. There's other ones that kind of just sit on your bench. And then in terms of dynasty, there's a thing called taxi squad. And it's basically for players who may not produce right away, but someone you want to hold on to see if they can kind of make it in the NFL. Sometimes it takes a couple of years for these guys to really get their feet on the ground and keep going. So that, this taxi squad, you keep a lot of players in there, and most of the time players you draft from your rookie draft, unless they're the top 7 or 8 guys, usually sit in there for about a year, and you kind of hoping that they actually make it to the next level. Just have them sit there for the year, and if you can play them, then you take them out of there and start them in your fantasy leagues. If not, you kind of just hang around there until they kind of can develop the right way.
Where do you see players like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields going whenever they get drafted, if you could look at the schedule right now?
Oof. I mean, you would assume that, the Jacksonville Jaguars have been linked to getting one of the top quarterbacks in this draft. Guys like Carolina as well has been linked to getting the top quarterback in this class. I mean, if you just look at week 1, I would say that if Gardner Minshew can keep things up for the Jags, they may put him out of contention. But if that was a one-week wonder, Trevor Lawrence to the Jags seems real possible. Other teams like the Jets weren't that great, but they do have Sam Darnold, so I don't know if they would be really in the market for a quarterback. The Bears are someone who we really already know that Mitch Trubisky is probably not their franchise guy, but won them a game on Sunday, so that's interesting from that point of view. So that could be a situation where like a guy like Justin Fields goes maybe in that 5 or 6 pick of the drafts instead of maybe not. He's probably not going to be the first overall. It's probably going to be Trevor Lawrence, but Justin Fields and Trey Lance, both these guys are talented guys that could end up in places like Chicago, Carolina, other needy teams, maybe the Colts if they don't have a great season. Anywhere where there's an aging veteran quarterback right now, or a quarterback who just doesn't seem that much talent in their game.
Can you talk about your segment, the football position?
So there's a couple different things we do with that. We do this obviously right before the season starts. We kind of go through our position rankings, and we just talk about why we like some other guys over others. And we did this a lot in end of August, most of August and end of July. And basically what it was that, we kind of develop it, change it every single year just to make it a little easier for the listeners to understand and hear more. And then that's my biggest thing, is to get our listeners to hear as much information as possible with under an hour. Because anything after that, usually it's a bit much on a person's, attention span of continuously just listening. So I try to always bring a lot of information quickly. So doing these positional rankings, we get through a lot of players very quickly as we can, talk about basically, where they're ranked in our rankings, and why we have guys higher or lower compared to each other or compared to the consensus rankings that are out there. We're just kind of seeing where guys going and giving our takes on why we like them or we don't like them really.
With James Conner being injured, do you see that the running backs will switch to the starter as Benny Snells or Jalen Samuels?
It's definitely Benny Snells, if anyone. We kind of saw that last year come to fruition when Jalen Samuels really didn't snag the starting job when James Conner went out. Benny Snell got opportunity, and he's been someone who's been really hyped up in camp this season. And if James Conner is out for an extended period of time, a guy like Benny Snell, I think I don't know if he'll take the starting job, because James Conner, when healthy, is very versatile kind of running back who can help his team win. But Benny Snell will probably see a bigger role in this offense now if he can kind of shine if James Conner were to miss multiple weeks moving forward.
Was there any surprise on trades whenever the trades were happening?
Obviously, like DeAndre Hopkins is probably one of the biggest ones still to this date, this offseason, where you trade away DeAndre Hopkins, who's probably arguably a top 5 wide receiver in this league, for a guy like David Johnson, who, David Johnson had his moments at one point back in 2016, but hasn't been a elite tier running back in many years. He looked good this past Thursday though, but that's still one of the biggest bone scratchers that I can't understand why the Houston Texans would just do that when they have a franchise quarterback that desperately needed a wide receiver 1, and now he's filled with a lot of wide receiver 2s now in Deshaun Watson.
Was the Ryan Switzer drop, was that surprising to you?
Ryan Swisher.
Yes, from the Steelers when
I
they
would,
released him.
I would say not that much. I've heard of him. I watched him play a couple times. He seemed to be a guy that Ben relied on, like on a quick 3rd and 2, something like that to get that first down. But with Juju Smith-Schuster, guys like Deontay Johnson, James Washington, they drafted Chase Claypool in this past year's draft. It just seemed very it was going to happen. Unfortunately, he just kind of fell out of favor, and unfortunately, just didn't make the cut on this team, who's got a lot of great weapons now moving forward.
What are some future plans for your podcast moving forward?
I mean, there's so many things. I do a lot of things. My biggest thing is to continue to find a way to bring in revenue here. Either like me, or if there's one of our, no matter who it is, everyone gets a coach in front of their name. It's just a brand that we show, and we want to continue to build that brand up, that have people listen to us who we're just trying to help. We're not trying, again, the money isn't to me the huge biggest thing about that, just trying to help people and find ways doing more podcasts in a shorter time span, or just improving our website to make it just more functional for people to get quick information when they really need it.
Can you talk about if there was any famous people that y'all have interviewed on y'all's podcast?
I wouldn't say they're super famous, but in terms of the fantasy industry, we had a guy called Kyle Yates from the Fantasy Pros podcast. He's a rising guy over there, and he was great to talk to a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, I'd say at this point, that I had him on the podcast. Someone like Lauren Carpenter, she has been affiliated with the Fantasy Footballers podcast, Fantasy Pros, Roto World. She's done a lot of different things to build her brand up too. She's pretty out there in the industry. So we've had a couple guests on. We've had other guests on as well who are in their own rights, moving up in the industry too, that we've had on over the last last year and a half now.
What advice would you give upcoming future fantasy football podcasts looking to get into the same industry?
I tell you, it's hard. Not to sway you from wanting to do it. If you have a passion for it, follow your passion. That's what I could really say to you. It takes a lot of work, and it's going to take time. And you just have to do your research. That's a big thing. Continuously to work social media, throw knowledgeable stats out there on social media that people will look at and continue to say, hey, this guy said this. You just want to get your name out there, get involved in groups of sportcasters, not sport people, just to get your name out there, find retweet groups, like groups, just to continually build your brand and come up with good information. Don't be lazy about it. If you're going to do it 100%. And just work at it. It takes time, but eventually it just becomes fun after a while.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at Coach Stephen P over on Twitter. That's my page. If you want to follow the podcast, it's Coach's Fantasy. We're over on Twitter, so we post pretty frequently on there. So try to help you guys out, find great tools to help you guys win championships.
Thank you again, Stephen, for your interview, and best of luck in the Fantasy Coaches podcast. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, Stephen, for your interview.
Thank you, Brandon.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.